The dust swirled across the parched Montana territory as Vivian Taylor clutched her father's pocket watch, the only keepsake she had left of the man who'd raised her alone after her mother died of fever. The year was 1878, and the 17-day journey from Boston to Snake River had left her exhausted, filthy, and questioning every life choice that had led her west. Her uncle's letter had promised opportunity and family, but upon arrival, she'd found only a fresh grave and strangers claiming her inheritance. "Miss Taylor, you ought to consider Mr. Blackwell's generous offer," the town banker repeated, his thin lips barely moving beneath his mustache. $500 for the ranch is more than fair, considering the circumstances. Vivian straightened her spine, refusing to show weakness despite her trembling hands. At 22, she taught proper young ladies back east, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for this place, this wild, lawless territory where a woman alone might as well be wearing a target. "Mr. Reynolds, as I've stated, I have no intention of selling the Circle T. My uncle's letter clearly indicated that I am the sole heir, and I intend to honor his wishes by maintaining the ranch." Reynolds exchanged a look with the man beside him, Edgar Blackwell, cattle baron and self-proclaimed king of Snake River Valley. His dark eyes assessed her like she was livestock at auction. "Perhaps you misunderstand the situation," Blackwell said smoothly. "Your uncle's debts exceeded the value of his holdings. I'm being exceedingly generous. I've reviewed the ledgers, sir. While my uncle may have owed you for cattle feed, the amount nowhere approaches the value of 2,000 acres and a working ranch." Blackwell's expression hardened. "This country isn't kind to stubborn women, Miss Taylor. You'd be wise to remember that." As they departed, Vivian collapsed into her uncle's chair, the enormity of her situation crashing down around her. She had limited funds, no ranching experience, and 3 cowhands who clearly resented taking orders from a woman. But the alternative, returning east in defeat, was unthinkable. Miles away, Tristan Dawson guided his horse across the unforgiving terrain, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. At 30, he'd spent most of his adult life in the saddle, first as a Union cavalry scout during the final year of the war, then as a Texas Ranger, and now as a hired gun, though he preferred the term security consultant. The telegram in his pocket had summoned him to Snake River with the promise of good pay for honest work, something increasingly rare in his line of business. The sun was setting when he finally caught sight of the small town nestled in the valley. Snake River wasn't much a main street with the usual establishments: general store, saloon, blacksmith, church, and a handful of other businesses, standard for these frontier settlements. Tristan hadn't been in this part of Montana before, but he'd seen 100 towns just like it. He guided his horse, a sturdy buckskin named Copper, toward the livery. The stable boy couldn't have been more than 12, all elbows and freckles as he took the reins. "Take good care of him," Tristan said, handing over a coin. "He's had a long journey." "Yes, sir." "Best oats in the territory, I promise." The boy's enthusiastic response brought a rare smile to Tristan's face. The Watering Hole Saloon seemed the logical place to gather information and possibly meet his employer. Tristan entered cautiously, habitually scanning the room before approaching the bar. The piano player was butchering a Stephen Foster tune, and the usual mix of cowboys, miners, and local businessmen populated the tables. "Whiskey," he told the barkeep, sliding a coin across the scarred wood. "New in town." The bartender was an older man with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw. "Just passing through on business," Tristan replied noncommittally. "What kind of business brings a man like you to Snake River?" The question came from behind him, the voice smooth and confident. Tristan turned slowly to face a well-dressed man in his 40s, flanked by two hard-faced cowboys. Everything about the man screamed money and power. "I'm here to meet someone," Tristan said simply. "Edgar Blackwell." The man extended his hand. "I own most of the grazing land in this valley." Tristan shook it briefly. "Tristan Dawson." Recognition flickered in Blackwell's eyes. "The ranger from Texas. I've heard stories." "Former ranger," Tristan corrected. "And stories tend to grow taller with each telling." Blackwell laughed, motioning for the bartender to refill Tristan's glass. "Well, Mr. Dawson, if you're looking for work, I may have something that would interest a man of your talents." "I appreciate the offer, but I'm already engaged." "May I ask by whom?" "Snake River is a small community, and I make it my business to know everyone's business." Tristan took a measured sip of his whiskey. "I prefer to keep my arrangements private." Blackwell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course. But should your current arrangement prove unsatisfactory, my offer stands. I pay well for loyalty." After Blackwell departed with his men, Tristan finished his drink and headed to the hotel. The clerk, a nervous man with thinning hair, handed him a folded note along with his room key. "This was left for you, Mr. Dawson." The note was brief. "Circle T Ranch, Sunrise, V. Taylor." Vivian woke before dawn, anxiety having prevented anything more than fitful sleep. The ranch house felt too big, too empty, and too vulnerable. Uncle James had built a respectable operation from nothing, and she was determined not to lose it to vultures like Blackwell. But she wasn't naive enough to believe she could manage alone. She dressed practically in a simple skirt and blouse, adding her uncle's old pistol belt. The revolver was heavy on her hip, but after yesterday's confrontation with Blackwell, she wouldn't go unarmed. She'd learned to shoot back east. Her father had insisted his daughter know how to protect herself, but she'd never had cause to draw on another person. The foreman, Samuel Green, was waiting in the kitchen, his weathered face creased with skepticism as he watched her prepare coffee. "The men are wondering if they'll be paid on schedule, Miss Taylor," he said without preamble. "They will," Vivian assured him. "I've arranged to sell some of the furniture from Boston. The funds should arrive within the week." Green nodded, though his expression remained doubtful. "And after that, we run this ranch as my uncle intended." "I may not know everything about cattle, Mr. Green, but I'm a quick study." "With all due respect, Miss Taylor, reading about ranching in books ain't the same as doing it. This land will break you if you let it. Then I suggest you and the others help ensure that doesn't happen." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm expecting a visitor this morning. When he arrives, please direct him to the house." Green looked like he wanted to say more but merely nodded and left to join the other hands. Vivian sighed, knowing she hadn't won him over. She needed allies, and quickly. She was reviewing the ranch ledgers when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Through the window, she saw a tall man on a buckskin horse riding toward the house. Even from a distance, there was something imposing about him, the straight-backed posture, the alert way he scanned his surroundings, the deliberate control with which he handled his mount. Vivian smoothed her skirt and went to the porch to meet him. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Broad-shouldered and lean-hipped, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. His face was tanned and weather-beaten beneath the brim of his black hat, a thin scar cutting through his left eyebrow. "Miss Taylor?" he asked, dismounting with fluid grace. "Mr. Dawson, I presume." "Thank you for coming." She gestured toward the house. "Would you like some coffee?" He nodded, tethering his horse to the hitching post before following her inside. In the small parlor, he removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. He remained standing until she took a seat, then settled across from her, his posture relaxed but alert. Your telegram was vague, Miss Taylor. You mentioned trouble and the need for someone with my particular experience. Vivian poured coffee into 2 cups before responding. I inherited this ranch from my uncle a month ago. Since my arrival, I've faced increasing pressure to sell to Edgar Blackwell. When polite offers failed, the tactics became less civilized. Blackwell approached me last night, Tristan said. Offered me work. Vivian felt her stomach drop. And did you accept? I don't work for men like Blackwell. His expression revealed nothing, but his tone left no room for doubt. What exactly have these less civilized tactics involved? Cut fences, cattle driven off. One of my hands was beaten in town last week. 2 nights ago, someone fired shots at the house. Tristan's jaw tightened. You're alone here. I have 3 ranch hands, though I question their loyalty. My uncle trusted them, but they clearly resent taking orders from a woman. And you're determined to keep the ranch. This is my home now, Mr. Dawson. My uncle built something here, and I won't see it destroyed by a man like Blackwell. Tristan studied her for a long moment, those penetrating blue eyes seeming to read more than she wanted to reveal. Finally, he nodded. I'll need to assess your defenses, speak with your hands, and learn the boundaries of your property. My fee is $20 a week plus room and board. Relief flooded through her. Agreed. There's a room above the barn that my uncle kept for guests. Will that suffice? It will. He rose, placing his hat back on his head. One more thing, Miss Taylor. If I take this job, I do it my way. That means you follow my instructions regarding your safety without argument. Vivian bristled at his tone but recognized the sense in his words. Very well, Mr. Dawson. But I expect to be kept informed of your decisions. This is still my ranch. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. Understood. Over the next few days, Tristan assessed the Circle T-Ticket's vulnerabilities, which were numerous. The 3 hands Green, Peterson, and Martinez were competent cowhands but not fighters. The property was too large to adequately patrol with so few men, and the cattle were scattered across several grazing areas. Vivian proved both a help and a hindrance. She was intelligent and determined, absorbing ranching knowledge with impressive speed. But she also insisted on participating in every aspect of the operation, putting herself at risk despite his warnings. You can't keep riding out to check the north pasture alone, Tristan told her on the 4th morning, intercepting her as she saddled her horse. I've been perfectly safe so far, she countered, tightening the cinch. Because Blackwell's men are watching, figuring out our patterns. They're not stupid, Miss Taylor. They're waiting for the right opportunity. Vivian turned to face him, frustration evident in her green eyes. Then what would you suggest, Mr. Dawson? That I cower in the house while you and the men handle everything? I'd suggest you value your safety enough to take reasonable precautions. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Blackwell wants this land. The easiest way to get it is to remove you from the equation, if not by intimidation, then by more permanent means. Fear flickered across her face before determination replaced it. Then teach me to better defend myself. I know basic shooting, but I suspect that's not enough. Tristan hadn't expected that response. Most women of her background would have balked at the suggestion of violence. It's not just about shooting, though we'll improve your skills there. It's about awareness, strategy, and sometimes knowing when to retreat. Then I'll learn all of it, she said firmly. That afternoon, he began her training, starting with improving her handling of the Colt revolver she carried. Her foundation was better than he'd expected. Her father had taught her well, but she needed practice drawing quickly and shooting from different positions. In a real situation, you won't have time to stand perfectly still and aim, he explained, demonstrating how to shoot from behind cover. And never waste your last bullet. Always keep one in reserve. Vivian proved to be a dedicated student, practicing until her arms ached and her fingers were raw. Her determination impressed Tristan more than he wanted to admit. Most men would have given up and sold to Blackwell by now, but she persisted despite the odds. As the sun began to set, they walked back to the ranch house together. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. "My father would be shocked to see me now," Vivian said with a small laugh. "He sent me to finishing school to become a proper lady, not a gun-toting rancher." "What brought you west?" Tristan asked. It was the most personal question he'd posed since arriving. Vivian was quiet for a moment. "After my father died, I found myself teaching etiquette to wealthy girls with no real purpose beyond making advantageous marriages. When Uncle James's letter came offering me a place here, it seemed like a chance for something meaningful." She glanced at him. "What about you? How does a Texas Ranger end up hiring out his gun in Montana?" Tristan's expression closed. "That's a long story, Miss Taylor." "We have a long walk," she countered. He sighed, knowing she deserved some measure of trust if he expected the same from her. "I joined the Rangers after the war. Thought I was upholding the law, bringing order to chaos. Then I realized some of the men wearing badges were no better than the outlaws we hunted. When I wouldn't look the other way on certain matters, I found myself without a badge." "What matters?" she pressed. "A prominent rancher's son raped a Mexican girl. The captain wanted to let it go. I didn't." His jaw tightened at the memory. "I arrested him anyway. The charges mysteriously disappeared, and I was told my services were no longer required." Vivian studied his profile in the fading light. "You did the right thing. Didn't help the girl much." His voice was bitter. "Her family was run off their land, and last I heard they'd fled back across the border." "Is that why you agreed to help me? Because I'm facing a powerful man like that rancher?" Tristan gave her a sidelong glance. "I took this job because you're paying me, Miss Taylor. Don't mistake it for anything else." But even as he said it, Tristan knew it wasn't entirely true. Something about Vivian Taylor's courage in the face of overwhelming odds had stirred emotions he'd long thought buried. It was a complication he didn't need, especially now, when her life might depend on his clear judgment. The next morning, Tristan rode into town to gather intelligence. Snake River was buzzing with activity. Saturday was trading day, and farmers and ranchers from the surrounding area filled the streets. He visited the general store first, listening more than talking as the proprietor complained about late supply wagons and gossiped about local affairs. "That Boston woman still holding out against Blackwell?" the shopkeeper asked, wrapping a packet of coffee. "Folks are taking bets on how long before she gives in or gets run off." "And what's your bet?" Tristan asked casually. "I don't bet against Blackwell. Man always gets what he wants." The shopkeeper leaned forward. "Word is he's bringing in more men from Butt. Professional types, if you catch my meaning." Tristan filed away this information as he completed his purchases. Outside the store, he spotted the sheriff, a portly man named Wilson who, according to Green, was firmly in Blackwell's pocket. The lawman eyed him suspiciously, but made no move to approach. At the telegraph office, Tristan sent messages to contacts in Texas and Colorado, requesting information on Blackwell. He was crossing to the livery when he noticed 3 rough-looking men watching him from the alley beside the saloon. He continued walking, keeping them in his peripheral vision until they made their move. They waited until he'd reached a quieter section of street before approaching, spreading out to block his path. The leader, a tall man with a pockmarked face, spoke first. "You're the gun Vivian Taylor hired." It wasn't a question, so Tristan didn't bother answering. "Mr. Blackwell wants to speak with you, privately." "He knows where to find me," Tristan replied, making no move to accompany them. "This ain't a request, mister." The man's hand drifted toward his pistol. "Tell Blackwell if he wants to talk, he can come to the Circle T in daylight alone." Tristan's voice was calm, but his stance shifted slightly, ready for trouble. The leader's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake siding with that woman. Blackwell's offering double whatever she's paying you to walk away. Is that before or after your friends here beat me senseless as a show of good faith?" Tristan asked dryly. The man's hand closed around his gun butt, but Tristan was faster. His Colt appeared in his hand as though by magic, hammer cocked and aimed at the man's chest before the thug could clear leather. "Like I said, Blackwell knows where to find me. Now step aside." For a tense moment, Tristan thought the man might try his luck anyway, but survival instinct won out. The three men moved aside, the leader spitting on the ground as Tristan passed. "This ain't over," he called after Tristan. "It never is," Tristan murmured to himself. When he returned to the Circle T, Vivian was in the barn with Martinez, learning how to repair tack. Her face was smudged with dirt, and her hair was coming loose from its pins, but she handled the leather with surprising competence. Something about the sight her determination to master every aspect of ranch life tugged at him unexpectedly. "Mr. Dawson," she greeted him, setting aside her work. "Did you learn anything in town? Blackwell's bringing in more men," he said without preamble. "Professional gun hands, according to the gossip." Martinez crossed himself. "This is bad, señorita, very bad." "When?" Vivian asked, her voice steady despite the fear that flashed in her eyes. "Soon. We need to prepare." Tristan turned to Martinez. "Where are Green and Peterson?" "Mending fence on the east boundary," the vaquero replied. "Ride out and bring them in. We need to talk strategy." After Martinez left, Vivian faced Tristan squarely. "Tell me the truth. How bad is this going to get?" Tristan considered lying, offering reassurance, but decided she deserved honesty. "Blackwell's men made it clear he wants me gone and you intimidated. He's not going to stop pushing until he gets this land." "Then we push back," she said, determination hardening her delicate features. "This is my home now, Mr. Dawson. I won't be driven from it by threats." Something shifted in Tristan's chest, admiration, perhaps, or concern. "It's going to take more than determination, Miss Taylor. Blackwell has resources, men, and the law on his side. All you have is a stubborn streak and one hired gun." "Then we'll make it count," she replied. "What's our next move?" That evening they gathered around the kitchen table, Tristan, Vivian, and the three hands to formulate a plan. The atmosphere was tense. Green and Peterson clearly doubted their chances, while Martinez seemed resigned but loyal. "Blackwell's tactics so far have been aimed at forcing Miss Taylor to sell," Tristan explained. "But if he's bringing in professional gunmen, he's escalating. We need to be ready." "For what? A war?" Green scoffed. "5 against who knows how many. Those ain't odds I'd bet on." "We have one advantage," Tristan continued, ignoring the interruption. "This is our ground. We know every hill, creek, and tree line. Blackwell's men don't." "What are you proposing?" Vivian asked. "We fortify what we can, set watches, and I teach all of you how to fight smarter, not just harder." He looked at each man in turn. "I understand if any of you want to ride out. This isn't your fight." Peterson, a young cowhand barely out of his teens, spoke up. "Old James gave me a chance when nobody else would. I ain't running out on his niece." Martinez nodded. "La Señorita has been fair. I stay." All eyes turned to Green, the oldest and most experienced of the three. He sighed heavily. "I've put too many years into this place to see it taken by a snake like Blackwell. I'm in, but I still say we're fools." Relief washed over Vivian's face. "Thank you, all of you." Tristan outlined his strategy, reinforcing the ranch house windows, establishing lookout points, planning escape routes, and training everyone in defensive tactics. By the time they finished, it was well past midnight. As the hands departed for their bunks, Vivian remained at the table, staring into her cold coffee. Tristan noticed the slight tremor in her hands, the only outward sign of her fear. "You should get some rest," he said softly. "Tomorrow will be a long day." She looked up at him, her green eyes shadowed with exhaustion and worry. "Do you think we have a chance, Mr. Dawson?" "Truly," he sat across from her, choosing his words carefully. "I think Blackwell has underestimated your determination, and mine." "That's not really an answer." "It's the most honest one I can give." He hesitated, then added, "Fear is natural, Miss Taylor. It keeps you alive. But don't let it paralyze you." She nodded slowly. "My father used to say something similar during thunderstorms. I was terrified of them as a child." "Smart man, your father. He would have liked you, I think." A small smile touched her lips. "Though he would have been scandalized by my current situation, unchaperoned with a man of your reputation." Tristan's mouth quirked upward. "My reputation? Green informed me you're known as the ghost in certain circles. For your ability to appear and disappear like one, and for the way you send men to their graves. Ranch hands talk too much." "Is it true?" Tristan's smile faded. "Parts of it. The rest is just stories men tell when they've had too much whiskey." He stood, suddenly uncomfortable with the direction of their conversation. "You should lock your door tonight, Miss Taylor. I'll be patrolling until dawn." As he turned to leave, she called after him, "Vivian." He paused, looking back. "If we're going to face this together, you might as well use my given name." After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "Tristan, then." "Good night, Tristan." "Good night, Vivian." The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Tristan drilled the men on defensive tactics while strengthening the ranch's vulnerabilities. Vivian continued her shooting lessons, improving rapidly under his instruction. Despite the circumstances, a tentative camaraderie developed between them, punctuated by moments of unexpected connection, shared laughter over Peterson's terrible coffee, quiet conversations as they patrolled the property boundaries, the brush of hands as they passed tools between them. Tristan found himself noticing things he should have ignored: the way sunlight caught the red highlights in her chestnut hair, the determined set of her jaw when she mastered a new skill, the grace with which she moved despite the unaccustomed weight of a gun belt. It was dangerous, this growing awareness, but he seemed powerless to stop it. On the fifth morning, Martinez rode in from the eastern boundary, his horse lathered with sweat. "Riders coming," he reported breathlessly. "At least 10 men heavily armed. Blackwell is with them." Tristan's expression hardened. "How far?" 20 minutes, maybe less." "Get everyone inside. Vivian, take position upstairs with the rifle. Green, Peterson, cover the ground floor windows. Martinez, watch the back door." Tristan checked his revolvers. "Remember, don't fire unless I give the order. This might just be intimidation." But even as he said it, Tristan knew this was more. The number of men, the timing. Blackwell was done playing games. Vivian touched his arm before moving to her position. "Be careful." The contact was brief, but it sent an unexpected jolt through him. "Always am." He stepped onto the porch as the riders came into view, dust billowing behind them as they approached in formation. Blackwell rode at the front, flanked by his foreman and the 3 men from town. Behind them came strangers, hard-faced men with the unmistakable look of hired guns. They reined in 50 yards from the house, spreading out in a loose semicircle. Blackwell urged his horse forward a few paces. "Dawson," he called, "I gave you a chance to walk away from this." "You did," Tristan agreed calmly. "I declined." "Where's the Taylor woman?" "Safe. "What do you want, Blackwell?" The cattle baron's smile was cold. "What's rightfully mine? This land should have been sold to me years ago, before that old fool Taylor convinced his highfalutin niece to play rancher. Seems the land belongs to Miss Taylor now, legal and proper." "Legal?" Blackwell laughed harshly. "Boy, I own the law in this valley. That deed could disappear with one word from me." "Then why haven't you made it disappear?" Tristan challenged. "Why the threats, the intimidation? If your claim was legitimate, you wouldn't need guns to back it." Anger flashed across Blackwell's face. "I'm done talking, Dawson. Either the woman signs the deed I brought, or we take the land anyway and bury what's left of you all on it." From inside, Tristan heard the distinctive sound of Vivian's rifle being cocked. Glancing back, he saw her at the upstairs window, the barrel trained on Blackwell. "Miss Taylor seems to disagree with your assessment of the situation," Tristan said mildly. Blackwell's eyes narrowed as he spotted Vivian. "You're making a mistake, girl. A big mistake. The mistake was thinking you could steal what's mine." Vivian called back, her voice steady despite the tension. "This is Taylor land, and it's going to stay that way. Have it your way." Blackwell backed his horse up, rejoining his men. "You've got 1 hour to reconsider. Then we're coming in, and God help anyone who stands in our way." As the riders withdrew to the tree line at the edge of the property, Tristan returned inside. Vivian was already descending the stairs, her face pale but resolved. "He's not bluffing," Tristan said without preamble. "Those men aren't just for show. I know." She straightened her shoulders. "What do we do?" Tristan glanced at the three hands who watched with varying degrees of fear and determination. "We can't win a direct confrontation, not against those numbers." "So we run?" Green asked. "No." Tristan's mind worked rapidly, assessing options. "We need to even the odds. Draw them out, separate them, pick them off gradually." "How do we do that?" Peterson's young face was taut with anxiety. Tristan outlined his plan, quickly using their knowledge of the terrain to set ambush points, creating diversions, fighting on their terms rather than Blackwell's. It was risky, but it offered better odds than a siege. "Miss Taylor should leave," Green insisted. "Head for the next county, find the federal marshal." Vivian shook her head firmly. "I'm staying. This is my fight as much as anyone's." "Vivian," Tristan began. "No," she cut him off. "I won't run while the rest of you risk your lives for my property. I can shoot, I can ride, and I can fight." Tristan wanted to argue but recognized the futility. Besides, splitting their already small force wasn't ideal. "Fine, but you stay with me at all times. Understood?" She nodded, relief evident in her expression. "What's our first move?" "We need to get to the high ground, the ridge overlooking the north pasture." "Martinez, take Peterson and circle around behind them, create a distraction." "Green, you're our best shot with a rifle, find a position on the east slope. Vivian and I will draw them toward the ridge." As the men gathered supplies, Tristan pulled Vivian aside. "If this goes badly, promise me you'll run. The deed in your saddlebag is worthless if you're dead." Something in his tone made her search his face. "Why do I feel like you're planning something you haven't told me?" "Because you're perceptive," he admitted. "Blackwell wants me out of the way. I might be able to negotiate a deal my departure for his withdrawal." "Absolutely not," she said fiercely. "He'd never honor such an agreement, and you know it." "Maybe not, but it could buy us time." "Time for what? For him to kill you and then come after me anyway." She gripped his arm, her fingers digging into the fabric of his shirt. "We stand together, or not at all." The intensity in her eyes, the determination in her voice, it reached something in Tristan that had been dormant for too long. Before he could think better of it, he leaned down and kissed her, a brief, hard press of lips that surprised them both. When he pulled back, her eyes were wide, cheeks flushed. "What was that for?" she whispered. "Luck," he said roughly. "Let's move." The hour passed quickly as they positioned themselves. Tristan and Vivian reached the ridge just as Blackwell's men began advancing toward the ranch house. From their vantage point, they could see the entire property, the men spreading out in pairs, weapons drawn, moving with the confidence of those who expected little resistance. "They think we're still inside," Vivian murmured. "Good. Let them waste time searching the house." Tristan watched as Martinez and Peterson executed their part of the plan, creating a distraction by setting fire to a hay stack near the eastern boundary. Several of Blackwell's men immediately diverted toward the smoke. "It's working," Vivian said with quiet excitement. "So far, but stay alert. These aren't amateurs." Tristan checked his weapons again, a habit ingrained by years of dangerous situations. The sound of a rifle shot echoed across the valley green, making his presence known. 2 more shots followed, and one of Blackwell's men fell from his horse. "That will get their attention," Tristan said grimly. "Ready," Vivian nodded, her hands steady on her rifle. They moved along the ridge, using the rocks and sparse trees for cover as they descended toward where Blackwell and 3 of his men had gathered, gesturing toward the east slope, where Green was positioned. Tristan signaled for Vivian to stay low while he circled behind the group. His plan was to create a crossfire, forcing Blackwell into the open. He'd nearly reached position when the crack of a twig beneath his boot alerted one of the men. "Behind us!" the man shouted, swinging his rifle around. Tristan fired twice in rapid succession, dropping the man before he could get off a shot. The others scattered for cover as Vivian opened fire from her position, forcing them to divide their attention. Chaos erupted as more shots rang out across the property. The planned ambush had turned into a full-scale gunfight. Tristan moved quickly from cover to cover, trying to work his way closer to Blackwell, who had taken refuge behind a large boulder. A shout of pain told him someone Green or one of the others had been hit, but he couldn't spare the time to look. 2 of Blackwell's men were converging on Vivian's position, having spotted the muzzle flash of her rifle. "Vivian, move!" he yelled, providing covering fire as she scrambled to a new location. She was halfway to better cover when a bullet kicked up dirt near her feet. She stumbled, falling hard, her rifle clattering against the rocks. Before she could recover, one of Blackwell's men was on her, yanking her upright by her hair. "Got the girl, boss," he shouted, pressing a pistol to her temple. Time seemed to slow as Tristan watched in horror. Blackwell emerged from behind the boulder, a triumphant smile spreading across his face. "Drop your weapons, Dawson," Blackwell commanded, "or she dies where she stands." Tristan hesitated, calculating angles, probabilities, desperate for a solution that didn't end with Vivian's death. But the man's grip was too secure, the gun too close to her head. Slowly, he lowered his revolvers, placing them on the ground. "Let her go, Blackwell. This is between you and me now," Blackwell laughed. "You're in no position to make demands." He approached Vivian, who struggled against her captor despite the gun at her head. "I offered you a fair price, Miss Taylor. Now you'll get nothing but a shallow grave unless you've reconsidered my offer." "I'll die before I let you take this land," Vivian spat, her defiance undiminished despite her precarious position. "That can be arranged." Blackwell nodded to one of his men. "Bring her to the barn. It's time she learned what happens to women who don't know their place." As the man began dragging Vivian away, Tristan made his move. In one fluid motion, he drew the small derringer from his boot, the backup weapon they'd failed to check for, and fired. The bullet caught Vivian's captor in the shoulder, causing him to release her and stagger backward. Vivian dropped to the ground as gunfire erupted again. Tristan dove for his discarded revolvers, rolling to cover as bullets tore into the earth around him. When he came up shooting, he caught one of Blackwell's men in the chest, but Blackwell himself was already retreating toward the barn, shouting orders to his remaining men. "Vivian," Tristan called, scanning frantically for her. "Here." She emerged from behind a fallen log, dirty and disheveled but apparently unharmed. "They're heading for the barn with Martinez," Tristan cursed as he saw two of Blackwell's men dragging the struggling vaquero toward the large structure. "Where's Green? Peterson?" "I don't know," she said, retrieving her fallen rifle. "I heard shooting from the east slope earlier." "Stay close," Tristan instructed, his tone brooking no argument. They moved cautiously toward the barn, using whatever cover they could find. The gunfire had diminished, suggesting that the fight was concentrating around the barn. They were 50 yards away when Blackwell's voice rang out. "Dawson, Taylor, show yourselves or your man dies." Peering carefully around the corner of a storage shed, Tristan saw Martinez on his knees in front of the barn, hands bound behind him. Blackwell stood behind him, revolver pressed to the vaquero's head. 4 of his men formed a perimeter, weapons trained outward. "What do we do?" Vivian whispered, her voice tight with anxiety. Before Tristan could answer, the barn door burst open, and Peterson stumbled out, pushed by another of Blackwell's men. The young cowhand was bleeding from a head wound, his face bruised and swollen. "Found this one hiding in the hayloft," the man announced, shoving Peterson to his knees beside Martinez. Blackwell smiled coldly. "2 down. Come out now, Dawson, or I start putting bullets in them. Miss Taylor, the same applies to you." Tristan's mind raced, searching for options. There were too many of them, too exposed. Even with his skill, the odds of successfully taking down all 5 men before one of the hostages was killed were virtually non-existent. "I'm going out there," Vivian said suddenly. "No," Tristan grabbed her arm. "He'll kill you." "Not immediately. He still wants the land, which means he needs my signature." Her eyes met his, determined and frightened but resolute. "It will buy you time to find Green to come up with a plan. Vivian, listen to me. There's no plan that ends with you walking away if you go out there now." "Then come up with one," she said fiercely. "But I won't let Martinez and Peterson die when I can prevent it." Before he could stop her, she stepped out from behind the shed, her rifle held high above her head. "I'm here, Blackwell. Let them go." Tristan cursed under his breath but stayed hidden, knowing that revealing himself now would eliminate any chance of saving her or the others. Blackwell's laugh carried across the yard. "Miss Taylor, how noble of you. Come closer slowly." Vivian advanced with measured steps, her back straight, chin high despite the guns trained on her from all directions. Tristan had to admire her courage, even as he silently promised to get her out of this alive. When she reached the barn, one of Blackwell's men roughly disarmed her, checking for hidden weapons before shoving her toward his boss. "Where's your hired gun?" Blackwell demanded. "Gone," Vivian lied smoothly. "I told him to ride for help when we realized we were outmatched." Blackwell studied her face, clearly skeptical. "Search the property," he ordered 2 of his men. "Find Dawson and the other hand." As the men moved to obey, Blackwell grabbed Vivian's arm, dragging her into the barn. Martinez and Peterson were forced to follow, guarded by the remaining men. The heavy doors swung shut behind them, leaving Tristan with only the slightest glimpse of what awaited inside. Keeping to the shadows, he circled the barn, looking for another way in. A small window at the rear offered a view of the interior. What he saw made his blood run cold. Vivian had been forced to her knees in the center of the barn. Blackwell stood over her, rage contorting his features as he berated her for her defiance. Martinez and Peterson were bound to support beams, helpless to intervene. "You've cost me time, money, and men," Blackwell snarled, striking Vivian across the face with enough force to knock her sideways. "Now you'll pay for that stubbornness." Vivian straightened, blood trickling from her split lip. "This land isn't yours to take, Blackwell. It never will be." Blackwell's response was to grab her by the hair, yanking her head back painfully. "I tried doing this the civilized way. Now we'll do it my way." He turned to his men. "Bring the branding iron. It's time Miss Taylor learned what happens to cattle that wander onto the wrong range." Horror dawned on Vivian's face as one of the men moved to the forge in the corner, where the Circle T branding iron rested among the coals. Another man brought rope, binding her hands in front of her despite her struggles. "You're insane," she gasped, renewing her efforts to break free. "You can't do this." "I can do whatever I want in my valley," Blackwell replied, his voice eerily calm now. "After we're done, you'll sign that deed if you can still hold a pen." Tristan had seen enough. Rage, cold and focused, sharpened his senses as he calculated his approach. There were 3 men inside with Blackwell, plus the 2 searching the property. The odds were still poor, but he no longer had the luxury of waiting for a better opportunity. Moving silently to the rear door of the barn, he tested the latch. Locked. He'd have to create a distraction, draw some of them outside. His gaze fell on the nearby wagon, loaded with hay for winter feed. Perfect. Within minutes, he'd set a small, controlled fire in the wagon. As smoke began to rise, he positioned himself beside the main barn doors, waiting. It didn't take long before one of the men inside noticed the growing flames visible through the windows. "Fire!" the man shouted. "The wagon's on fire!" The barn door flew open as 2 of Blackwell's men rushed out to deal with the threat. Tristan waited until they were fully outside before making his move. In 2 swift, silent steps, he was behind the first man, driving the butt of his revolver into the base of the man's skull. As the thug crumpled, his companion turned, reaching for his gun. Tristan was faster. His left-hand Colt barked once, the shot muffled by the man's chest as Tristan pressed the barrel directly against him to minimize noise. The outlaw's eyes widened in surprise before the light faded from them. Inside the barn, the commotion had momentarily distracted Blackwell and his remaining man. The branding iron glowed red-hot in the forge, but Blackwell's attention had shifted to the open door. "What's happening out there?" he demanded. Tristan didn't give them time to figure it out. He stepped through the doorway, both revolvers raised. His first shot took Blackwell's remaining henchman in the shoulder, spinning him away from Vivian. His second caught the man in the leg as he tried to reach for his fallen weapon, ensuring he stayed down. Blackwell, however, was quicker than Tristan had anticipated. He yanked Vivian up, using her as a shield, his own revolver pressed against her temple. "Drop the guns, Dawson, or I'll kill her where she stands." Tristan hesitated, his aim unwavering despite the desperate situation. Vivian's eyes met his across the barn, a silent communication passing between them. "You won't kill her," Tristan said with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. "She's your only claim to this land." "There are other ways to get what I want," Blackwell snarled. "Dead or alive, this land will be mine. Now drop the guns, or I put a bullet in her pretty head." Time seemed to stretch as Tristan assessed his options. Blackwell's finger was tightening on the trigger, his face contorted with rage and fear. Vivian, despite her bound hands and the gun at her head, was slowly shifting position. Then she moved with a sudden jerk. Vivian slammed her bound hands upward, knocking Blackwell's gun arm just as he fired. The bullet went wide, embedding itself in the barn roof. In the same instant, Tristan fired, his bullet grazing Blackwell's shoulder, forcing him to release Vivian. She stumbled forward as Blackwell recovered, raising his gun again. But Tristan was already moving, closing the distance between them with long strides. Before Blackwell could aim, Tristan was on him, knocking the weapon from his hand with one powerful blow. Blackwell fought back with surprising strength for a man his age, landing a solid punch to Tristan's jaw. They grappled in the center of the barn, each seeking advantage while Vivian struggled with her bonds nearby. "You're dead, Dawson," Blackwell gasped, reaching for a knife at his belt. "You and the girl both." The blade flashed in the dim light as Blackwell lunged. Tristan twisted away, the knife slicing through his shirt and scoring a shallow cut along his ribs. He caught Blackwell's wrist as the man tried for another strike, forcing the arm back until bones creaked under the pressure. With his free hand, Tristan drew his own knife, the one he kept sheathed at the small of his back. "It's over, Blackwell. Surrender now and you might live to see a trial." "Never," Blackwell spat, renewing his efforts to break free. "This valley is mine, it's always been mine." The struggle intensified, both men now armed with blades, circling each other in the confined space. Blackwell's experience showed in his methodical approach, while Tristan's youth and training gave him the edge in speed. Vivian had managed to free herself and was working on Martinez's bonds when a shout from outside drew everyone's attention. "Blackwell, it's over. We've got your men." Through the open barn door, Tristan glimpsed Green bloodied but alive alongside Peterson's young brother and several townsfolk, all armed and advancing on the barn. Blackwell's momentary distraction was all Tristan needed. With a swift, precise movement, he disarmed the older man, sending Blackwell's knife skittering across the dirt floor. A powerful blow to the jaw sent Blackwell stumbling backward, where he tripped over a fallen beam and landed hard, the wind knocked from his lungs. Before he could recover, Tristan was standing over him, knife at his throat. "It's finished," Tristan said quietly. "Yield or die here." For a long moment, hatred and defiance blazed in Blackwell's eyes. Then, slowly, the fight seemed to drain from him. "Yield," he muttered, the word clearly painful to speak. Tristan stepped back, keeping his knife ready as Green and the others entered the barn. Two men secured Blackwell while others attended to his injured henchman. "The sheriff's coming," Green informed them, wiping blood from a cut above his eye. "Along with half the town. Seems Blackwell's methods finally pushed some folks too far." Vivian had freed Martinez and was helping the vaquero to his feet when Tristan reached her side. Without a word, he pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as relief flooded through him. "Are you hurt?" he asked, gently tilting her face to examine the bruise forming where Blackwell had struck her. "Nothing that won't heal," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "You came back for us." "Always," he said simply, the word a promise he hadn't known he was making until it left his lips. The aftermath unfolded with surprising swiftness. The sheriff arrived with a posse of townsfolk, many of whom had apparently harbored their own grievances against Blackwell. Evidence of his numerous crimes from land theft to murder emerged as people finally felt safe enough to speak out. The doctor tended to the wounded, including Vivian's split lip and the cut on Tristan's side, while statements were taken and plans made to transport Blackwell and his surviving men to the territorial prison to await trial. By nightfall, the Circle T was quiet again, though an air of watchfulness remained. Green, Martinez, and Peterson kept guard around the property, while Vivian and Tristan retreated to the ranch house to tend to their injuries more thoroughly. In the kitchen, Vivian heated water for tea, her movements careful as she navigated her bruised body. Tristan watched her from the doorway, struck by her resilience. She'd faced death, torture, and the loss of everything she valued, yet here she stood battered but unbroken. "You should rest," he said softly, moving to take the kettle from her hands. "So should you," she countered, but allowed him to guide her to a chair. "Your side is fine. The doctor said it's shallow." A comfortable silence fell between them as Tristan prepared the tea, his usual efficiency evident even in this domestic task. When he placed a steaming cup before her, Vivian wrapped her hands around it gratefully. "Thank you," she said, the words encompassing far more than the tea. "For everything. I would have lost more than the ranch today if not for you." Tristan sat across from her, his own cup untouched. "You're the one who had the courage to stand against Blackwell when everyone else bowed to him. I just helped even the odds." "Is that all this was to you?" "Evening the odds." Her green eyes searched his face, looking for something beyond the professional detachment he'd maintained throughout their acquaintance. "You know it wasn't," he admitted after a long moment. "I took this job for the money I stayed for. Other reasons." "What reasons?" She pressed, needing to hear him say it. Tristan hesitated, years of self-imposed isolation making the words difficult to find. "I've spent most of my life fighting other people's battles, Vivian, standing for justice when no one else would, but it's been a lonely path." His eyes met hers. "Until I found someone worth fighting beside, not just for." The simple honesty of his words touched her deeply. Setting aside her tea, Vivian reached across the table to take his hand. "What happens now? Blackwell will face justice. The land is secure. My job is done." He turned his hand to clasp hers. "I should move on." "Is that what you want, what I want?" He paused, struggling with desires long denied. "What I want hasn't mattered for a long time." "It matters to me," Vivian said softly. Rising from her chair, she moved around the table until she stood before him. "Tell me what you want, Tristan." In answer, he pulled her gently onto his lap, one hand cradling her face with unexpected tenderness. "This," he murmured, before claiming her lips with his. The kiss deepened, months of unspoken feelings and suppressed desire flowing between them. Vivian's arms wound around his neck, her body melting against his as the world narrowed to just the two of them. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Tristan rested his forehead against hers. "I want to stay," he confessed. "If you'll have me." "I'll have you," she whispered, "in every way possible." Dawn broke over the circle tea with a promise of renewal. The damage from the previous day's confrontation was visible: bullet holes in the barn, scorched earth where the wagon had burned, bloodstains not yet washed away by time or rain. But there was a sense of peace that hadn't existed before, a feeling that the worst was behind them. Vivian watched the sunrise from the porch, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the morning chill. Beside her, Tristan stood with his habitual alertness, though the tension that had characterized his posture since his arrival had eased considerably. "What are you thinking?" he asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "That I never expected to find this when I came west," she replied, gesturing to encompass not just the ranch but him as well. "I thought I was coming to honor my uncle's legacy, to find purpose. I never imagined finding home," he suggested. She smiled despite the tenderness of her split lip. "Yes, home." She turned to face him fully. "We have a lot of work ahead of us, rebuilding what Blackwell damaged, expanding the herd, making the Circle T profitable again. The hope in his voice was unmistakable. "Unless you've reconsidered your decision to stay." His answer was to draw her into his arms, his kiss a silent affirmation of his commitment. When they parted, his blue eyes held a warmth she was still getting used to seeing there. "I'm not going anywhere," he assured her. "Though I should warn you, I know more about tracking outlaws than raising cattle. Then we'll learn together." She traced the scar through his eyebrow with a gentle finger. "Partners, in every sense of the word." In the days that followed, Word of Blackwell's arrest, and the circumstances surrounding it spread throughout the territory. The details grew more dramatic, with each retelling how the Boston schoolteacher had defied the most powerful man in the valley, how the legendary Texas Ranger had single-handedly defeated a small army of gunmen, how the pair had exposed years of corruption and intimidation. Visitors began arriving at the Circle T, neighbors offering assistance with repairs, former victims of Blackwell's schemes expressing gratitude, curious onlookers hoping to glimpse the couple at the center of the territory's most exciting story in years. Through it all, Vivian and Tristan worked side by side, rebuilding what had been damaged, strengthening what remained. The ranch hands stayed on, their loyalty cemented by the events they'd survived together. Green's experience proved invaluable as they restructured the operation, while Martinez's skill with horses and Peterson's enthusiasm for new techniques helped modernize practices that had grown outdated under James Taylor's management. 3 months after Blackwell's arrest, the territorial court convicted him of multiple counts of assault, attempted murder, and land fraud. The judge, unmoved by Blackwell's protests of innocence, sentenced him to 20 years in the territorial prison, effectively a life sentence for a man his age. The same week, Tristan received a letter from the governor's office offering him a position as territorial marshal. It was an honor, a recognition of his skills and integrity, and a chance to continue the work he'd done throughout his career. He discussed it with Vivian late into the night, weighing the opportunity against his commitment to the ranch and to her. "You should accept," she told him finally, curled against his side in their bed. "It's who you are, Tristan, a protector, a seeker of justice. I would never ask you to deny that part of yourself. But the traveling, the danger, we'll manage," she assured him. "The ranch will be here when you return. I'll be here." She placed his hand over her stomach, where the first hints of roundness were just becoming visible. "We'll be here." His eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You're certain?" "The doctor confirmed it yesterday," she said, unable to contain her smile any longer. "We're going to have a child, Tristan." Joy such as he'd never known flooded through him. He gathered her in his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that spoke volumes about his feelings. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "Both of you." "And we love you," she replied. "So take the marshal's position. Do what you were born to do, but always come home to us." "Always," he promised. The next morning, they rode into town together to send Tristan's acceptance to the governor. While there, they visited the jeweler, where Tristan selected a simple gold band that suited Vivian's practical nature. They were married that afternoon in the small church, with Green, Martinez, and Peterson as witnesses. It wasn't the elaborate ceremony her Boston upbringing might have suggested, nor was it the solitary existence Tristan had resigned himself to after leaving the Rangers. It was something new, built on mutual respect, shared courage, and a love forged in the crucible of adversity. As summer turned to fall and fall gave way to winter, the Circle T prospered under their joint leadership. Tristan's duties as marshal took him away periodically, but never for long, and never without passionate reunions upon his return. Vivian's pregnancy progressed smoothly, her body changing to accommodate the new life growing within. When snow blanketed the valley, transforming the harsh landscape into something softer, more forgiving, they spent long evenings planning for the future, both immediate and distant. They discussed names for the child, improvements for the ranch, dreams they'd once thought beyond reach. On a cold January night in 1879, with a blizzard raging outside and Tristan pacing anxiously in the parlor, Vivian gave birth to a son. They named him James, after her uncle, with Michael as a middle name to honor Tristan's father. as Tristan held his son for the first time, gazing down at the tiny face that somehow combined features from both of them. He finally understood what had been missing in his life before Vivian. Not just love, though that was central, but purpose beyond justice, connection beyond duty, a future beyond the next battle. "He's perfect," he whispered, carefully returning the sleeping infant to Vivian's arms. "He is," she agreed, exhausted but radiant with happiness. "Though I expect he'll be as stubborn as both his parents." "Poor child," Tristan laughed softly. "He never stood a chance." Spring came early that year, bringing new growth to the valley. The Circle T expanded its operations, investing in better breeding stock and modernizing equipment. Tristan's reputation as a fair but uncompromising marshal helped maintain peace in the territory, while Vivian's business acumen transformed the ranch into one of the most successful in the region. Young James thrived, growing into a sturdy toddler with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. By his second birthday, he was already showing a remarkable affinity for horses, much to Tristan's pride and Vivian's carefully concealed anxiety. Their family expanded again with the arrival of a daughter, Elizabeth, in the summer of 1881. Tristan, who had once believed himself incapable of the tenderness fatherhood required, found himself completely captivated by his little girl. Her first smile, first word, first steps, each milestone filled him with wonder and gratitude for the life he'd never expected to have. As the years passed, the story of how they met, of cattle barons and branding irons, of courage and defiance became family legend, told and retold to their children, and eventually their grandchildren. The tale evolved somewhat in the telling, the danger perhaps emphasized, the romance certainly embellished, but the core truth remained unchanged. That love, like justice, sometimes requires one to stand firm against overwhelming odds. By the time Tristan and Vivian celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and the community they'd helped build, Snake River had grown from a frontier settlement to a thriving town. The Circle T remained the heart of the valley, a testament to what could be accomplished through partnership, determination, and faith in one another. And if visitors to the ranch noticed the aged branding iron mounted above the fireplace, the one that had nearly been used for such a terrible purpose, few knew its full significance. For Tristan and Vivian, it served as a reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything before they'd truly found it, and of the strength they'd discovered in each other when facing their darkest hour. It was a symbol of their beginning, their crucible, their triumph, not just over Blackwell but over the forces that would have kept them apart: duty, isolation, fear. In its way, that branding iron had indeed marked them, not with scars of ownership, but with the indelible proof that some bonds, once forged, can never be broken.